So good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where you are in the world and where you'll be listening to this. And I know some of you will be viewing this webinar after the event online, and we welcome your comments by email after that as well. So I'd like to introduce you to the, welcome you to the SMI Virtual Roundtable webinar and debate. We're going to be talking about the key issue of smart technology and AI and how to exploit these bottom line game changers. Before I introduce the participants, just really want to talk a little bit, just to get a little bit of an intro into this, that the advent of smart technology is changing the way we live and the way we work, and the maritime industry is no exception to this. And we've seen it over the last 18 months, I think, with the way that we've had to react with the pandemic. But sensors on vessels provide huge amounts of data on engine, pump, and generator performance. But how do we use this information to optimize our operational, regulatory, and our safety approaches? So good data analysis and transparency are key so that all stakeholders can work together to reduce accidents, improve efficiencies, and maintain regulatory compliance. So our speakers today will discuss and debate the best ways that the industry can work to achieve these goals. But there's a key element in the title there, the bottom line game changers. And I think this is really, really good to get an idea on what shipping can be looking forward to and what it can expect. Because the sort of embracing of digitalization and technology and smart technology and AI has been quite rapid over the last 1 to 2 years. And I think that is going to continue. So I'm going to just introduce the participants, and I'll ask them also just to give a little bit of a 1 or 2 minute summation on their views and their reflections on the subject matter, and then we'll go into the debate. And I will then ask also the delegates, people listening in, you can send in your own questions through the chat facility or the Q&A facility, and we'll endeavour to ask some of your questions as well. So we're very pleased and delighted to have Cosmo King, who's co-founder and CIO of IoCurrents. And Cosmo, thank you for your time today. And I know you're we're all from all different parts of the world, so I do appreciate the fact that you're coming at different time zones. We have Patrick Ryan, who's Senior Vice President, Engineering and Technology for ABS. Patrick, thank you very much. Erik Bjørkli, who's Vice President of Business Development at Kongsberg. Erik, nice to see you, sir. We have Torbjorn Dimblad, who's Chief Information Officer at Anglo-Eastern, and a great backdrop there in Hong Kong. So Torbjorn, we look forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments. Then we have Sven Brooks. Sven, you're Senior Director of Business Development for KVH Watch. So Sven, thank you very much and appreciate your time today. We also have Pascal Ray, Managing Partner of Puma Risk. Pascal, thank you for your time and good to see you. Last but certainly not least, Knut Ording, who's Senior Principal Consultant and Innovation Manager at DNV Maritime. My name is Sean Maloney. I'm publisher of Ship Management International, but I'm also Managing Director of Elaborate Communications. So I'm your moderator today. And again, thank you very much to everybody for the panelists today and for coming along and giving up their time, and also for the visitors to take part as well. So we'll start really. I'm going to go down around the people here on my screen, the panelists on my screen from left to right. So Cosmo, can I just ask you just to give me, in 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, your sort of views on this whole issue of smart technology and AI and the whole aspect of game changers? What are your reflections?
Sure. Well, it's a topic that we could spend a long time talking about, but at a high level, AI is just algorithms that are applying higher level analytics on the data. So it's allowing us to make sense of massive data sets that you wouldn't be able to do with other techniques, and to extract answers that wouldn't be available through traditional statistical data analysis techniques. That's machine learning. Artificial intelligence is taking those answers to drive human decision making. So really, that's kind of it in a nutshell. Now, what can we do with it is the part we can talk a long time about all the different types of models and the different ways that we can apply it. But in shipping, we see that that the time is right for applying these more advanced techniques, because the volume of data, the growth of data and the growth of the sensors is growing rapidly. And I think it's faster than anyone can make sense of.
Well, Sven, thank you very much indeed. And we will come on to the whole issue about how agile shipping is and whether it can, how quickly it can adapt. Pascal, let me get your views. You're next on my left to right framework here. Over to you, Pascal.
Okay. So on the risk management and insurance side, we view this new technology, this smart technology, as a virtual risk barrier. It's another layer of risk management that we did not have before. We have, and this is something that's just beginning. Insurance underwriters are just now starting to understand the benefits of this. Anytime you can reduce risk, you increase certainty, and therefore you can reduce costs and perhaps broaden your insurance program. At the very minimum, it opens conversations with underwriters, for changing terms and conditions. We're involved in bringing these new technologies to the maritime risk management insurance underwriting community using a digital platform for distribution.
Okay, Pascal, if I can ask next, I'll just move your microphone up a little bit, upwards, just nearer your mouth. That's perfect. So, thank you. Patrick, over to you, if I can get your thoughts and your views.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, and thank you for having us all today, and my best to all the panelists. As I think about machine learning and AI and smart technologies in general, or any technology more broadly, to me, it's all about outcomes. What are we trying to accomplish? I think Cosmo did a good job talking about what the technology is, and Pascal hit one of the first ones, risk management. But from my perspective, there are lots of possible outcomes. Improved maintenance is one of the ones that I think most people in maritime immediately go to, which of course pays into risk management. Condition of the vessel and condition understanding is, of course, what class cares about. So that's primary and focus to our areas. And I think, as we start to understand what is being imposed on the industry from a decarbonization perspective, that may prove to be the biggest. So as we see ship managers and shipping deal with the challenge of decarbonization, the dependence on machine learning, streaming data, artificial intelligence, and these digital technologies to help them along the journey to achieve their decarbonization goals, I think that's the biggest outcome that will really drive AI and machine learning in the future.
Okay, brilliant. So some aspects there that we can pick up on the debate. Okay, over to you, Torbjorn. And your views very much, I suppose, from a ship management and a client perspective, I suppose. But give me your thoughts.
Sean, yes, thank you. I'd actually like to share a bit of a personal story, and it's a little bit of a digression, but bear with me. So listen, I bought my first Alexa device a couple of years ago, and last Sunday I was configuring a couple of new smart plugs that I recently bought. And part of the setup to do that, it was prompted to scan my home network, which I did, and of course now I can ask Alexa to turn off the living room lights, which is great. Kids are happy. One of the things that happened, though, to my surprise, was that the Alexa app prompted me and said, "Listen, I've discovered your printer on your network, and I can do some things with that." So within a couple of clicks, I ended up setting up so that the printer would inform Amazon, in this case, I guess, that whenever it's low on ink, and it would then automatically go out and purchase some more ink for us and have it delivered to home. To the home, which means for me that I'm never going to get another call from my wife or kids to say, "Hey, the printer is out of ink, and please can you sort that out?" Which, I don't know, for anyone who has been in the tech store trying to remember what their printer model is because they can't remember what ink cartridge type they had, this is kind of a game changer. As I think about that experience and that story in the context of what we do as a technical ship manager, I see. I'm really excited about what smart technology and AI can do for us. For me, it really is a game-changing technology. That being said, I think we're still several years away from fully embracing it. That has to do with what I experience every day in the office, right? And that's from the strategic, being able to actually communicate a vision, to be able to make the necessary investments in this with the expected outcomes that we talked about a moment ago, but also to the very, practical and tactical. How do we train the workforce, a very large and diverse workforce, to embrace this and adopt different ways of working? So I have quite a few experiences in that area, and I look forward to sharing some of those with the group today. And thank you very much for having me along.
That's brilliant, Torbjorn. Yeah, the training issue is quite important. And yeah, I mean, Alexa, I think we're all getting to grips with Alexa. And certainly my daughter's put on TikTok, and then one of the TikToks come up and say, Alexa can do this. And suddenly all my Alexas are doing something completely different because they're picking up or they're hearing. It frightens the hell out of me. But okay, Knut, over to you. So get your thoughts.
Okay. I think I will continue on some of what was mentioned by Ryan. I mean, over the last years, the shipping industry has been faced with an increasing pressure from regulators, governments, and end customers to reduce harmful emissions. We had outlined strategies to realize zero emission from shipping by the middle of the century. So for owners and operators of ships, a change becomes no longer an option, but a necessity for survival and success. And of course, this requires organizations to rethink their current strategies and to change and develop to achieve a sustainable operation that can strengthen their competitiveness in both the short term and in the longer term. However, what has often not been seen to be in place to support organizations in making this move has been a wider implementation of digitalization needed to efficiently monitor, drive, and improve the performance of the ships and to facilitate sustainable operations. Of course, with the last year, the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the need for adapting to sustainable operations, this has changed quite a lot, I would say. And we have seen the maritime industry transitioning towards digitalization, enabling new opportunities by using data streams from sensors and other sources of information as basis for decisions and enhanced monitoring and control. And just an example from our own operations and service deliveries in DNV. One of the prerequisites, I would say, for digitalization is cybersecurity. And in DNV, we have signed more contracts for our cybersecurity services this year alone compared to the complete period since the cybersecurity services were launched in 2016. So I think that's also a sign of the industry moving towards digitalization and taking this into account. Together with cybersecurity, of course, there are other prerequisites for safe and efficient implementation. You have well-defined and designed data collection infrastructures. You have the implementation of common data standards for contextualizing the data, and of course also proper data quality management. And there you also see that there are some elements lacking. But I believe that when we have these prerequisites in place, and also maybe adding the solving data ownership and data usage rights, we are moving and enabling towards smart shipping and also a wider application of analytics, machine learning, and also artificial intelligence in a safe and efficient manner.
Thank you very much indeed. First of all, make sure you're unmuted, Sean. Just coming on to Erik, you're from Kongsberg and certainly must be at the forefront there of looking at that machine monitoring and vessel monitoring and what have you. Can you just give me your views then over the next couple of minutes, just get your thoughts?
Yeah, certainly. I think, first of all, I don't think we've really seen the extent by far or where this is going to take us. If I take, a simple data set as the position of the ship, this is something that was picked up by satellites through a Kongsberg CTEX AIS receiver that we found to be so sensitive that we could actually pick this up when we put it on a satellite. And the result now is that we all have an overview where most ships in the world are at any given time. And one data set, the position of the ship, and then you look at all the spin outs that we have available today just by knowing where this ship is. And the AI algorithms and the machine learning that is generated from one data set is really amazing. And then what we're doing now is seeing the ability of these ships to connect even more data sets. And that's what we in Kongsberg are really driving forward now, is to make that transition as quick, cost efficient, and smooth as possible, and enable that data sharing, because machine learning is not getting anywhere without the data. And then when you have that data, you can do all kinds of stuff. And we're starting with the dynamic trim optimization, whole growth, and optimizing the whole, and route optimization with even further details, driven by all of these external factors, mostly by sustainability, like was mentioned earlier here. But we can talk about all these things, but the baseline is you have to have data to make it happen. So that's a critical factor, and to make this possible, because it's quite complex, getting structured data with high quality, and to make it possible, we need to collaborate. So that's really what we in Kongsberg has been driving lately, is to open up. And I'm really happy to see that many of the panelists here are people that we in Kongsberg collaborate with already in many different levels. So I'm really excited about the future in that perspective, because I think digitalization has also opened up the box for to lower the threshold for collaboration among ship owners, charters, class societies, connectivity providers, and OEMs like Kongsberg.
Sven, Erik, let me come on to you. And I think really the role that the airtime providers and the satellite comms people are playing is crucial to all of this. But give me your perspective. There are a lot of issues that we're raising here, which we'll touch on in a second. But give me your thoughts.
Well, yeah, as a connectivity provider, it's one thing connecting people with one another. That's basically our bread and butter business, making sure that people can talk to one another no matter where they are in the world. But the same now also counts for machines. There's a clear machine-to-machine connectivity requirement, being able to turn that data into actionable and trusted intelligence. And this is what a lot of people on the panel are doing within their organizations. As a connectivity provider, it's our job to do that in the most secure way, in the most efficient way possible. And so we went to the drawing board about 2 years ago to come up with a dedicated IoT terminal that's completely air-gapped, to allow OEMs, to allow service companies, classification societies, IoT service providers to interact with the vessel in the safest way possible, and completely independent from any type of crew welfare network on board, to drive engagement, productivity, and ultimately also business resiliency. We all know shipping is an expensive industry. So we got to figure out a way to run those vessels as efficient as possible, as safely as possible. And I was just reading an article the other day, I think it was an IBM research paper on digital acceleration. Basically mentioned that tech-savvy organizations are outperforming their peers during the pandemic by an average of like 6% points premium across 12 industries, including transportation industries such as shipping. So making use of the data and turning that data into actionable insights is key. And the key differentiator in that paper identifies being connectivity and AI, because that bulk of data is so large that just sifting through it with the human means is largely inefficient. You need to apply algorithms. So AI can help here to enhance and protect top-line revenue, experience and engagement. And with its impact on both sides on the financial equation, it's pretty clear that there's a high value within AI. And we, as a connectivity provider, for us, we can deliver that high frequency data, the connectivity that's necessary in order to run those algorithms and sift through the data and make use of it with the added benefit of live interventions, for instance.
Thank you very much, Sven. And I think really it sort of touches, I suppose, what we were talking 3 or 4 years ago, big data and small data. You know, that this massive amount of info is coming in, and then we just know that we have to do one thing or do another. Very much, I suppose, with your Apple Watch telling you to run a bit faster or to stand up and walk around the office. But I'm going to sort of open it up now to the floor, and also ask the attendees also if they'd like to ask any questions to send them through. But how far down, the smart technology and AI route is shipping? And how agile is it? Because, I mean, shipping is very fragmented. It has leaders, but also has Luddites when it comes down to new technology. What are the challenges and the opportunities that are emerging? Torbjorn, let me ask you, throw that in your direction first, and ask the panelists, please stick your hand up if you wanted to make comments as well. So it's open floor now. But Torbjorn, how agile is shipping, do you think, when it comes down to smart technology and AI?
I think the short answer is that, that we are quite a lagging industry. However, as a generalization, obviously it's very traditional, it's asset heavy. That being said, of course, that there are first movers, there are a lot of organizations that are embracing it in different ways. And what we see, I guess, with such a broad fleet and such a broad, I guess, portfolio of owners as well, we really see both ends of that equation. I mean, I have conversations on the one hand with clients who are asking really pertinent questions on, how can we improve the performance of the ship, through the tools that are available to them and the data that's available to them, very much to what Erik talked about earlier as far as AI models that do voyage optimization, hull and propeller performance, all of these sorts of things that are available to them. And then really on the other end of the spectrum, I'm still having conversations with some owners about, going from FBB to just VSAT to be able to improve the connectivity for crew. So yeah, I think there's really a very, very broad spectrum here. When I think about the opportunities though, I guess that Alexa example was a little bit sort of future state, but if you think about it, if one of the primary things that we do as an organization, as a technical manager, is we're constantly monitoring the machinery on board, and then either servicing it or procuring spare parts for it. I mean, it's a big part of what we do, and that entire process, could and will be, I'm sure, quite disrupted by the opportunities that you have with improved data and with applying AI algorithms to it. So that will have a dramatic bottom line impact to operating costs. I also think that what was mentioned earlier with respect to the environmental impact, what's good for environment tends to be good for the bottom line as well in most cases. So that will also drive this, and I think that the regulations that are coming in the years ahead are also going to be a bit of a turbocharger into further investments in this, and that's going to bring the laggards along much more quickly perhaps than crew welfare issues or other topics like that.
Would you think, because you've got that sort of fragmentation within shipping, that it's going to slow the process down? I mean, because you are going to have those early adopters driving ahead and looking for driving value into the bottom line. And then you've got the other traditional element of shipping that's just going to carry on doing what it's doing. So is it going to be 2-tier, 3-tier elements going on here, or will the industry just all come together and make it work?
I think the answer to that question is quite nuanced, because there's a lot of factors in the economics of shipping. If you're a container operator and you're in a liner trade, any small improvements that you can make in your operation, where you have this consistency, it's going to have a direct impact to your bottom line. I think in other parts of the business where you're in the tramp trade, for example, you're a bulk carrier or perhaps an oil carrier that's waiting for that next fixture. The economics can be very, very different based on what the market is driving, and therefore perhaps some of the economic benefits aren't quite as obvious and as easy to justify. Because the charter party may demand that we need you to go a little bit faster, or the charter party demands that we may need you to go a little bit slower. At the end of the day, the owner is not directly impacted by that decision. Whereas in a liner situation, you really are in a different space altogether.
Okay, I mean, Erik, let me bring you in on this. I mean, looking at this whole thing of agility, you know, and the ability for the industry to take it up. I mean, what's your views on how quickly shipping can you know, benefit and maybe you know, harness the potential of these smart technology and AI?
You know, to start, it doesn't take much. So I tend to say that, you know, digitalization is not a quick fix, it's a journey. There's a lot of stuff you can do today, and you need to have a clear strategy for what you want to achieve, and how you're going to get there. And there's help to get with many of the panelists here and in the industry in general, looking at some of the front runners and what they've been doing, and because a lot of the stakeholders are sharing. Making publications on their findings and the results of what they've done. So it's really our common efforts that will drive the industry forward, and I really appreciate the openness between the parties that we collaborate with, at least. Because all these new inventions, like Sven Erik mentioned earlier with the KVH solution, this the ability to connect cheaper, better, faster, and more secure is allowing us to bring more services into the industry. With DNV and ABS, we collaborate on projects to commonly take our IP into something greater, because innovation is really about taking small innovations together and making a new one. So so there's plenty of examples of stuff that the shipper can do, but it all depends on the use cases and the way they're operating.
Yeah, I just to follow on that thought, the ship operators are doing these activities today. So crew are walking around the vessel all day, performing checks on systems. You're collating and uploading noon reports every day with data that's a summary of the activities that have occurred on the vessel. Those reports are getting digested by people on shore, put into spreadsheets, sent up to DNVGL to report on compliance activities. You know, yes, there are the advanced capabilities of dynamic voyage optimization based on AI and predictive analytics to help to tell when equipment is likely to fail. Those are a big chunk for some companies to bite off at this stage in the progression, but there's actually a spectrum of activities that people can automate today. And that's the kind of thing we're doing. I mean, even more important during the pandemic, that we've seen the pressure on the crew and less people on board, or more people under more pressure on board, yet having more and more tasks to do, more reports to send into their class. So can we automate some of those along the way as an early step for them? That's kind of an approach that we're taking. Yes, we have advanced AI solutions that we can show you. It's not actually that hard to onboard. Clean data is really important. Like Knut said, like you got to get to that point. I mean, if all your data is human generated, there's some challenges can lie. But the machines are outputting data all the time. So with systems that like Kongsberg has that are bringing together some of that high quality data, then we can actually do a lot of interesting things with it.
I just wanted to really emphasize and support Cosmo on that statement, because it's, you know, technology is available there. It's a matter of the stakeholders to put it together and to make the process smoother and more efficient for all parties. So, and that's really what we've been doing here. And with IoCurrents, we're starting this run, and then the output of the IoCurrents application might as well be something DNV can create value on. And then, you know, all these things fit together. It's a matter of simplifying the processes and make it more efficient for the customer. So, and then again, that starts with collaboration, openness, and the willingness to share.
Okay, you've been raising a number of interesting points, not least about the risk management, about the cyber threat, and also about the people and the training. You know, this is going to be a new world that we're going to be looking at. I want to bring in Knut and Patrick as well, your comments on this. Pascal, first of all, just talk to me a little bit about this whole issue of risk management with all of this involved, because, you know, it is there and it's becoming more of a threat. There's a lot of issues there that owners, managers need to be aware of, you know, when they're actually starting to embrace, you know, new technology. How serious an issue is that?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for improvement within the industry for risk management. You know, the maritime industry is much farther ahead than, say, the energy industry, which I also practice in. And in taking data like insights from IoCurrents and using it to prevent loss, to avoid losses, that's a step that we're working on right now, and I think that's where all of this is headed. You take you know, main engine damage claims are a main frequency loss event for insurance companies, and the marine insurance industry has not been doing that in the last few years. So rates are going up, and we've got to do something to reduce these losses. So the most frequent event is main engine damage, and taking these insights that we can get from smart technology and using it on a real-time basis, we can reduce those losses. Then when we take those main engine damage losses, which are in the billions of dollars of losses a year, main engine failure also causes collisions with fixed objects like bridges and other things, collisions, pollution events, and these events go into the billions of dollars. The ships are larger. We have many more containers than we used to have. A lot larger aggregation of risk involved, and so I see right now the maritime industry, as compared to other industries, is ahead of integrating these insights from smart technology into the risk management process. We're not as far as if you take a look at, say, trucking or even automobile insurance, where they have sensors on the vehicle. You get real-time risk assessment, you get a real-time rate reduction. We're not that far yet, but there's lots of room for improvement, and it's a very exciting process in the future.
Can I get a class perspective on this at the moment? I mean, Patrick, do you want to get some comments? Yeah, and then bring Knut, bring your views in on this.
Yeah, so certainly. So Pascal's right on, right? There's a lot of opportunity for risk reduction. Those that follow ABS know we have a product out there, a risk management platform called My Digital Fleet that takes lots of different elements, and to kind of build on what Ben Derek talked about, it doesn't necessarily have to be onboard sensors. Right? There's a lot of data that you can take advantage of. AIS data is a perfectly good example, and you can use that to start modifying your risk profile. I have a little bit of non-scientific data to share. We pulsed our own client base to see, what the uptake was on machine learning and AI, and the respondents came back at over half are at least doing some kind of a trial with data and machine learning. It's about 56%. So as to your very original question, Sean, what's kind of the uptake? And I mean, we're well into the early majority of adoption. We're past the early adopters. We're past innovators. But what was remarkable to me, as we thought about, is it because of autonomy? Is it because of condition? Is it because of maintenance? 85% of those doing something with data were doing it for fuel efficiency, or we're doing it for decarbonization. And as you relate that question back to risk, that's a risk that a lot of owners are dealing with from a business perspective, right? Not necessarily from a risk of loss perspective, but one of their business risks, they be competitive in the future of sustainability and new regulations, and leveraging data to manage their fuel efficiency as a mitigation of that risk is one of the biggest areas that we're seeing uptake. Now, that's not to say that only 15% are doing something else. Many people are doing multiple things, but that was the big peak, right, that we saw. I know, well, maintenance is what you use this stuff for. It's not necessarily all that you use it for, right? There's lots of other things, and the idea that technology should be pigeonholed for a particular outcome, I think, is wrong. I think the market will drive the real use and adoption of technology to achieve outcomes that people are seeing success with. And certainly, Pascal's observation on the risk, I think, has many facets. And I think thinking about the future of what you could use this data for beyond just kind of that typical maintenance management is certainly an important point.
Okay, Knut, can I get your thoughts? Because you also mentioned earlier about the implication or the aspect of the environment as well, and the role that all plays in it all. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely, and of course that is one area that we have seen that getting access to data can make reporting much more efficient and also provide owners and their stakeholders with a better overview of the performance to document compliance or to improve the performance of the operations. And also when it comes to managing safety risk, we of course see huge benefits from getting access to other sources of information than what we currently are getting access to through our onboard surveys or approval jobs. So what we're looking into is to use, of course, the access to data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, to combine it with the information that we already get, to enrich the information or even replace the sources of information that we are currently using. And I think there are a number of examples of that. Using different data sources and even also new data sources compared to what we have been discussing. For instance, events occurring on board a ship. Let's say that a system is being changed on board a ship that could introduce a risk. So then you would get access to other information as well than what we traditionally think of when we look into time series data. And using that and combining that in a risk model, putting it into a barrier model so that the owner and stakeholders could have a better understanding of the risk is something that we are looking into. And also when it comes to the drive in the industry, maybe just one remark on that. I think, like it was mentioned by others, it's of course, you see both. You see companies and stakeholders driving this, and you see, of course, that there are followers. But one example that we've seen from the class societies, where ABS, DNV, and the other class societies are actually disrupted, for instance, by the manufacturers, is by a service that Kongsberg have introduced, where they are challenging our onboard surveys and inspections of DP systems, and kind of forcing us and the other class societies to go over to a data-driven inspection regime, performing annual DP inspections based on data and the analytics instead of the onboard surveys. So I think it's important to keep up the pace in order to not be disrupted.
Yeah, I'll follow up with a short remark. What Knut was saying is certainly we see it as well. But one topic we haven't brought up yet, I think in depth, is the impact of the pandemic on the rate of adoption of these technologies. And something that we saw over the last year and a half was, an inability for ABS surveyors to attend vessels in person because of quarantine restrictions, and vessels didn't want folks coming on board. And so it drove, we call it remote survey, but it drove the adoption of other standards for class to assess condition, right? To ensure the safety of the vessel while dealing with the pandemic. And I think, as you think about technology adoption, I don't think it should go unsaid that the situation that we've been dealing with globally for the last year and a half has had a factor in the adoption rates of smart of AI and beyond.
So I think another example of the different uses for the same data is while we were talking about fuel optimization before, and how fuel, fuel is the cost of fuel, and the smarter use of fuel is a huge driver for anyone. That's especially now as the prices and the types of fuel get more complex. The same data, though, on the fuel can also drive better maintenance. There is now guidance from ABS and others on maintenance routines driven by metrics, so that you don't need to necessarily maintain your engine every X thousand hours, but you can actually adjust your maintenance based on the model of when it's likely to fail, based on the amount of fuel consumption, which is a much better indicator. So of course, the least efficient vessel in the world is one that's broken down, and using that same data, we can actually predict when the optimal maintenance window is, like reliability center maintenance programs that are heavily in use in aviation, and apply those in maritime, and reduce the number of failures, because when you're taking things apart prematurely, you're actually adding more risk.
But Erik, let me bring you in on this, because obviously there's talk about increased data sets, and then the need for a greater analysis of the data coming in. What demands is that putting on the connectivity side, and certainly the part of the industry that you're from? What demands are you getting from the industry? What do they want more from the connectivity providers and the airtime providers?
Yeah, it's obviously you always have the challenge that the traditional vessel is fitted in a specific way, it's outfitted in a specific way. And that's a challenge in a highly fragmented business. Even across a fleet, and whether we look at Anglo-Eastern, others, or ship management companies, you have a wide range of different vessels, different vessel types, different equipment types, and making that all play in harmony together is a challenge. Right now, the traditional vessel is fitted usually with a singular type, if at all, either an FBB or a VSAT, with limited connectivities, not built or geared up for machine-to-machine or IoT connectivity. And establishing a universal and agnostic platform, which is really, which Erik has also alluded to, the Kognifai platform, the vessel insight environment, the KVH watch environment, building a platform that's universal, agnostic, and accessible to different players in the industry is absolutely vital to harmonize it, but also to provide the scalability across fleets, so you can start to compare data across different vessels and different vessel types and different crews. So what we're being faced with is the challenge that ship owners want to address business resiliency and continuity. They want a level of remote support, which we're providing as a manufacturer of VSAT terminals anyway, but also for third parties to ensure that equipment can be serviced remotely, that remote surveys can take place, or that different services can be embedded. And what I found quite interesting was also Knut's comment here in terms of the survey experience. I think when I have to compare that somehow, it's like attending a Formula One or NASCAR race live versus watching it on TV. It's certainly a great experience being there live on the racetrack, but you only see a short fragment of the cars driving by. And when you're watching it on TV, you can follow the race, but at the same time, you get a wealth of information about the car, about the driver, about the status, down to the level of the tire pressure and the gear they shifted into. And I think that's the level of remote experience that we're going to see over the next 24 months to come, whether it's being driven by equipment manufacturer or class societies. It's not just a Teams call. It's not just a remote call. It's a activity that adds value to all participants, and that also is quite engaging for the crew on board. Now, we can talk a lot about digitalization, but there's still people on board, and it's a home to them. And they sail around the globe, and they're trained, and they're specialists and expert in their fields. And being able to link these experts with other experts around the globe, whether these are surveyors, or people coming from the automation or engine side, linking those together and having an independent, trusted, intelligent platform where they can share data and work together on troubleshooting, fixing problems, or just auditing or vetting things is an absolute game changer. And it doesn't require a lot of investment to make it happen. If anything, it takes the creativity, the vision, and the drive from management to embark on this journey. And as Ben put it, it's a journey. It starts somewhere, but starting there benefits everyone across the board in this highly fragmented industry, what we already talked about, whether you operate in the Indian Ocean or in the Pacific Ocean or elsewhere. You can connect people to one another, and you can make data-driven decisions together. And that's the true game changer. And that can be done very, very quickly indeed.
I think these are quite interesting point you're making there, and I think this is going to come on to our next question in a second. And maybe the smart TVs of 5 years time will also give you the press a button and you get the smell of the track as well as getting all the data. You can get all of this sort of stuff. But it goes into, I think, what Torbjorn was saying earlier, or one of them was saying earlier about telling you that you need to update your printer cartridge. That's that connectivity. That's that everything talking to each other. But Erik, you wanted to come in and make a comment there.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of opinions about condition monitoring, and it's really the same thing, like the example that was brought up with the Alexa. If the system is able to pick up the condition of the system, you could have a service engineer and a spare part ready before the customer even knows there's a problem with the ship.
Yeah.
The problem is the whole value chain. You have to get that data out. You have to see it in a context. It might not just be the engine itself that has an issue, but you need to see the data sets from around the engine. What is the overall load? What's the weather? And the ability to see this in the setting. And then you need the good connectivity, and then you need the class society that can create a smooth process for the shipper to utilize that type of class service. And this is something that we've seen that we all need to work on together to make that process even smoother. And this is something that we're talking about with the class societies today, because the ship leaves the yard with a 5-year warranty, and the shipper doesn't really care much about the engine because someone's going to come to fix it anyway.
Yeah.
Now the engine makers are looking into ways to collect data to understand more about the quality and the reasons for failure during those 5 years, and that's also something that we collaborate about. But after those 5 years, you need to do something, and we haven't really. I think we have a way to go, all of us, around or the support. The support teams around shipping to make the use of condition monitoring even smoother.
Okay, before we go on to the crux of it all about the game changers, and Sven was alluding a little bit to that earlier. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. We have got one here. Question for class: do you see machine learning and AI leading to a radical transformation of how class is maintained? What are the biggest obstacles to achieving this, and what are the timescales? Who'd like to answer that? Knut, Patrick, he's got his hand up.
Class, I suppose we ought to, right? So, I think the answer to the first question is, do we see a transformation coming? I think the answer obviously is yes. Right, and we've started already to put out guidance and documentation. We have a very comprehensive guide called our Smart Guide from ABS. DNV has similar products that really define how that data is collected and what you can do with it and how it gets approved for use. Certainly that's an important first step in the transformation. And then as we start to think about how do we understand condition and how can we then impact attendance and impact the survey process to increase OpEx, right? I think Sven Erik made a comment that it affects not just the bottom line, but the top line. You got to look at kind of both ends of the equation. And when you think about how can data impact your top line, you're talking about, improved OpEx, which usually in a lot of cases, at least we think, will come from a decreased footprint for class impact during physical attendances. And that's, of course, what we have in mind as we start to think about, okay, what do we ultimately want to achieve with the transformation of class through machine learning, data, and smart technologies. I think to the second part of the question, what are the timescales? I personally think it's years, not decades. Certainly not months, right? There's a lot of regulatory things. There's a lot of stakeholders in the process that need to be brought along. There's still a lot of learning to be done. But as I mentioned in the statistics earlier, I think we're well on our way to seeing that kind of uptake and that adoption in the industry. So I don't see this as something that is going to be 10 years away. I think this is something that's going to be much shorter term than that. And the pace of technology really is just going to tend to drive this, right? I think as we think about why does maritime have such a struggle with adoption sometimes, and I don't necessarily think it's because there's anything about the maritime industry that tends to be slower or more cautious. I just think it's a difference in the timescales of relative to how fast technology changes versus the length of life and longevity of a capital asset like a ship, like a vessel. And so I think the kind of the dichotomy of the rapidly changing pace of technical solutions and the things that you want to invest on your vessel, it's not a phone, right? You're not going to throw it away every year, right? They have long lifespans. And so the ability to impact infrastructure and to really make fundamental operational changes just tends to be at a longer time scale, which I think is a natural thing. So I think years, not decades, and absolutely it will transform class.
Yeah, I think my remark would be that it's already happening. So it's definitely something that is coming. One example that we have implemented is on the maintenance schemes for the ships. A ship can be on different maintenance schemes, continuous or a planned maintenance system, for instance. And if you have a planned maintenance or PMS system applied, you are required to perform an annual audit of how you maintain and keep records of the maintenance of the equipment in the PMS system. And that has now been fully automated based on data made available to DNV onshore, analyzed in an analytical engine, and where the complete fleet of an owner is audited throughout one day visiting the office instead of spending one day visiting each of the ships. So there are already services in place that are making use of this. And like I said earlier, we believe that these tools and methods will enable us to be performing a better and more qualified assessment of the risk of the assets. And we will use this to enrich what we are already doing. But I don't believe that we will replace every onboard visit, even in the future, with artificial intelligence or machine learning. I think you will need to kick some cabinets and walk on the deck sometimes in order to get a real feel of the status.
Thank you very much, Knut. Thank you. We've had a question coming in on the chat side from Shane BG, who said, can you share insights on best practice you acquired on projects with regards to gathering time series data on board? Is it through the control room systems? Who would like to answer that? Cosmo.
Sure. So from our perspective, an interesting thing is when you talk about time series data, the time is an index for correlating all of that data together. But if you look at all these assets on board the vessel, none of them know what time it is, really. So you've got engines, generators, tanks, cranes, conveyor belts, all kinds of pumps and motors. Those machines, some of them may have a clock in their system deep down in the PLC somewhere. But do you trust that someone that said it 10 years ago that it's still correct? You can't really, but you need to get this context of the whole vessel, essentially. And so one of the first tasks that we do for bringing that data together is to take a high quality timestamp from an atomic clock corrected source from NTP or from a GPS timestamp, and apply that to all of the different data the moment it's gathered. And then you need to have some knowledge of how quickly the data is gathered, how much latency there is. That creates the beginning of the data set. And of course, if you're gathering it many times a second, then it needs to be further analyzed, digested, and compressed before you could send it over the satellite. But that's, that lets you do analysis. And if you're not doing those things, you're not going to be able to analyze it as well.
I mean, it kind of depends on what you want to achieve with the data, but I would recommend at least that you start with your biggest OPEX factors, which is generally fuel. When we start collecting time series data from ships, we start with the data aggregators that you already have there, which is in most cases the automation system or the VDR. But this is what we're in business for right now, is to make that transition easy and really create a system that can connect to anything that you have on board that is capable of sending you time series data. So I would start with where we already have data on board and expand from there, and start with the fuel and sustain and emissions.
Okay, well, Shane, thank you very much for your question. Good question there. So I just want to come on to we've been talking for an hour already. It's amazing. It flies by. But I want to come on to this issue of the game changers. I think Sven was alluding to it earlier. And, you know, because shipping and the world is becoming disruptive, we've already heard about, you know, the Alexas, and certainly in the last year and a half, how we're starting to embrace it. But I'm going to ask just, you know, straight out, you know, what do we think of the game changers that shipping may face? Because, you know, like the COVID pandemic was a game changer, that was never guessed. I mean, nobody thought that was going to come along. What are we looking at as far as technology and AI is concerned? I'm going to whiz straight over to Torbjorn and get your views. Pascal, get a comment from yourself, and then please just stick your hands up and give us your thoughts, guys. But Torbjorn, get the ball rolling on this. What do you think are going to be the game changers that shipping may face, positive and negative here?
I think on the positive side, you know, in the short term, it's very much going to be about fuel consumption and emissions. I think that as we've already talked about, that's the place where we're going to see the biggest bang, and it's going to come. It's already here, and it's already been here for some years. But our ability to embrace it and really leverage it is I think the opportunity that is in front of us right now, both from the regulatory perspective, but also the cost perspective. As far as the challenges are concerned, you know, for me, it's very much about the human factor, and I think that, you know, it is a significant challenge, not to be underestimated. You know, who is able to, in today's world, to interpret, process, and make decisions based on the information that's available, to actually get the insights, to use the tools in the way that we would like them to be used. And I can talk, you know, from practical experience. We have these, you know, voyage optimization, fuel optimization systems across the fleet. We have literally hundreds of vessel managers, superintendents that are working, and our challenge, or one of our challenges, is to see them work consistently with the data that's available. So you have the same graphs that are available across the organization for different ships, different fleets, and, you know, how do you educate, train, and bring these people on board such that they're all seeing the same thing and ultimately making similar or the right decisions based on the information that they have. On communicating that, because they necessarily perhaps need to get a approval for a hull cleaning or something of that nature. So the human factor here, I think, is really very important, and I think that will extends further to the crew, because, you know, to what we were talking about earlier, I do think that owners, you know, today would love to see their ships the way we would watch a NASCAR event. Honestly, it is a conversation that I've had with half a dozen owners already today. You know, what systems can we put on board so that I can sit in the comfort of my home or sit in the comfort of my office, and I can really look at my ship, whether it's down in the engine room or out across the bridge deck. Let me see what the crew on board sees, so that I have the same information or similar information. At the same time, you know, you have a crew who are there that are specialists that are doing a job, and they are in a world now where if you have that kind of pressure on your shoulder, because Big Brother is watching in whatever form that may be in, there's a pretty significant cultural challenge there, because, you know, for many of the masters on board, for example, or chief engineers, they've had 10, 15, 20-year careers and it was a very, very different world for them 15 years ago. And now they're being watched and monitored from the office or from the owner's office for every decision that they're making, and potentially, I don't want to say second guessing, but certainly asking very, very pertinent questions. And how the organization, how the crew adopts to that, I think is a very important question that we need to have well thought through as we think about these platforms on board.
It's interesting because you touched on two of the three P's that people are now banding around, which is people, planet, profit, also known as ESG, environment, social, and governance. But I sort of bring back to what Sven was saying earlier about the need for this sort of agnostic platform there, because, you know, the big disruptor, shipping is disrupted at the moment. The big disruptor are the Amazons and the Googles coming in. What are they going to be doing? How is shipping going to be sit into that whole equation of the supply chain? How will the supply chains change? And what role will shipping have to play? Pascal, did you have any comments on what you, and then I'm going to bring Sven in actually. I want to get some more thoughts from Sven as well on this, but Pascal, maybe just some thoughts from you.
Okay, yeah, you know, the key point I want to make is that there's a direct relationship between efficiency and safety. And so the focus in the industry has been on efficiency, cost reductions on the operational side. There are significant cost savings on the risk management and risk transfer insurance side of the equation. So the faster we can transition getting this real-time data with actionable insights and also distribute the accountability off of the vessel into a risk management division, ship management company. The faster we can do that, the faster we'll start realizing, savings in the industry in terms of losses, right? Main engine damage losses, collision losses, pollution losses, the whole myriad of different types of loss scenarios that can be prevented with this technology. And I think that's the game changer that we see on the horizon.
This quick follow-up is, thinking about the human factor and all of the things that the crew, like you were saying, Torbjorn, that they've always had pressure and now there's more and more pressure. How can we use the technology to, and you don't have to all answer at a moment, but this is a thing we're thinking of, is just how can you use the technology to be supportive of the crew and to take burden off of the crew so that they also embrace and understand the value of it, rather than strictly pitching it to them as, now there's Big Brother watching, so be careful. But instead, helping them reduce paperwork on board, helping them to now have someone at their side so that they don't feel as afraid of what might happen, and they could be held accountable if there's an accident, right? So, there is. Didn't Egypt arrest the ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal? There's big implications of the actions of the crew as well, and I think they also need support.
If I could just jump in there and say that, answer a little bit. I think it's really, really important, and there are good ways of doing this. In a former life, we embarked on the company I was working for embarked on an enormous OpEx savings exercise, and it was really centered around fuel. But I guess the best decision that we made was that we put the information in front of the crew to make the decisions themselves, and we actually even introduced a little bit of competition. So one example was how quickly can you get in and out of a port in a liner trade, where if you can save 3 or 4 hours in the cargo operation or even the berthing or departure operation, that means you can go 0.3 knots slower on the next leg of the journey. And we had enormous success in bringing the information to the crew and having them see their performance last time, see the performance of the ship that did the port call right before that. And it was genuinely positive that for them as an experience and for us as well.
Sven, let me bring you in on this, because I think that's a very interesting analogy there, Torbjorn, that you can actually see the results of something you're doing. And I'm just going to give you a little example. I play golf, and now we have the World Handicap System. I know exactly at any one moment what I need to score for my handicap to go up or down. And that has basically improved my game because I know the yardsticks. I know exactly what I need to do to improve. Whereas before, you just went out and played blindly. But Sven, give me your thoughts on this, because it is talking about, the need for that, all systems, all elements talking to one another and all feeding off one another. But give me your thoughts on the game changer element, and also bringing in this whole issue of supply chains and Amazon and that sort of elephant in the room that we would all like to hear about.
Yeah, well, certainly. It's so just connecting there with this piece of on the human element. I think it's really important that we don't see any type of digital initiative going on shipping isolation from the people on board or its crew. Recently had a remote intervention in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and it was quite interesting to see the engagement level of the crew on board in trying to solve the problem together with the expert ashore. And it was interesting because it took place in the middle of nowhere and not during port time, so no travel was involved. So you can talk about the environmental impact, right? We're doing all this remotely. But at the same time, the vessel wasn't on its critical path. It wasn't that, oh, we gotta leave in 2 hours and we gotta rush through the paperwork and there's so much other work to do. No, they were completely focused and concentrated on the task, because in the middle of the ocean, they were relaxed, for the lack of a better term. And working then with an expert at the other side, who's not like a second or third degree trained technician, was incredibly engaging for both sides. It was engaging for the OEM because they learned new things from the user, from the super user on board. And at the same time, it was great for the engineering officer because they felt they were connected with someone who knows, and they could, and it wasn't this experience that you don't know what's going to happen in port, but you have the time pressure. It was a really nice, educated conversation, and the problem was resolved in the middle of the ocean. That's kind of what you want to see. So it works in favor of the people, but I do see there are some cultural elements that need to be addressed, of course. The way how these remote services are being conducted, making sure that all the health and safety protocols are in place to begin with. So there are different levels to look at it. At a bigger picture, connecting everything and anything, I think is one of these statements that make some companies shy away from digitization in shipping. It's more to the point that, to quote Bent again, this being a journey and starting somewhere, and where to connect. The automation system is of importance, the nav is of importance, but at the same time, when you look at emissions, MRV reporting, or also in future buyer certificates, we've got to look at scrubbers and ballast water treatment systems. So there are these subsystems on board of the vessel that you should consider connecting to, but they all serve different purposes to a certain extent. The game changes are most certainly around the legislative side of things. To the buyer certificates, I think this is something that's gonna grow, and I'm sure that class has a lot of viewpoints around this. Poseidon ESG principles, as well as renewable energy tracking, will play a role as well. So making sure you understand the power consumption, being to report this out, the emissions, all of this is taking place in many ways already, in very manual ways at the same time, but there are certainly ways to automate this quite efficiently today as well, with legacy systems in the field, as well as with new builds. So when it comes to digitizing vessels, I don't think we always have to look at the latest technology and the most modern vessels and the most modern fleets. There are solution applications available that allow you to tap into legacy systems as well, whether it's just reading the gauges live or recording it via an interface. But there are different ways of getting to the data. But we're doing everything at once is, I think that's what shocks people. It's a massive investment if you want to connect to everything. The outcome is uncertain. So starting with something that makes sense, that provides value, fuel optimization, trim optimization, safety at sea, business continuity in terms of being able to remotely support the vessel, and being able to run remote surveys for tramping vessels in particular. Because we don't have to schedule 3-4 months in advance. It's a huge benefit if you can schedule the survey for next week or the week thereafter. That's great news. So there are little steps you can take to improve the vessel's operations and get onto the, let's say, IoT M2M ladder without overspending, for sure.
Yeah, we're working with high tech in Kongsberg all the time. We've been collecting data from ships for about 15 years, but it's been when we started this, it was for the high-end market, and what we're doing now is taking that technology, making it more available at a better price that can defend the ROI for the masses. The next game changer, I think, is going to be a way to even further elevate this front end of collaboration and transparency. So, like Torbjorn said earlier, making the crew aware what's happening is the best thing you can do, because at the end, it's really the crew who has to make the change. So to close the loop of savings and receiving the benefits of all your efforts, you really get to have the crew with you. But then how do you do that in the most efficient way? Well, today we have remote interventions. We have dashboards that we can share and elaborate around. The next game changer that we're working on right now is digital twins, full 3D models, where you take the output from the AI algorithms and the simulations of what you thought the value should be, compare it with what it actually is, seeing it in a virtual version of the ship, combining it with all the drawings and the P&IDs and everything that you have on board, which is going to be a tool for all participants to collaborate around and make decisions based upon. But it's too costly for the majority of shipping today. But we are doing this on a conceptual basis, and eventually I think it's going to be so cheap that we can roll it out in bigger scale. Just like you saw, I sold my house, was it 3 years ago, and I had a photographer coming in, making a full 3D model so you could do a virtual tour around it. And I'm sure we're going to see that on ships very soon as well. And then we're going to put tags on real life values, combining it with simulated AR algorithms, and putting on all the information needed to get it a common sense of what's going on board, so we can make the changes needed and all parties are agreeing and getting the same view of the situation.
Knut, that's something that DNV have been doing for many years, isn't it? The digital twins that you seem to remember a couple of years back.
That's correct. We have been working on this open simulation platform, if that is what you're referring to, which is kind of collecting digital twins in a kind of standardized environment to make it easier to share and use these models. Okay, so we've only got a couple of minutes left. We've done ever so well today, and thank you very much, everybody. There's a question coming in from Jay, and he's talking about the more that the ship-based office, shore-based office, excuse me, intervenes in the daily operations on board and takes the decision-making away from the officers and ratings, we will be preparing for the worst in shipping. How can we monitor and empower the crew to achieve this while still, keeping the crew motivated, empower them and give them the dues for the work that they do? He's saying that we should never run the ship from the shore, but support them from the shore. I mean, Torbjorn, your thoughts on this?
So I wholeheartedly agree, and it's a topic that is brought up, I would say, actually almost daily here in Anglo-Eastern. The reminder that we're here to support, and I love what Erik said a moment ago. This is about us providing insights that perhaps are not necessarily available on the ship, providing guidance and support that may not necessarily be available on the ship, whether that's the ability to contact a vendor, an expert, to pull in a person with a different experience to help them with a challenge or an opportunity at hand. That's really the role that we should be playing. And so I'm very much in favor of that analogy of closing the loop. I've seen it work in practice very successfully. And I know that that's honestly, it's one of the things that we are constantly challenged with every single day. So yeah, I can only say agree.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. Oh, Cosmo, just closing comment.
I was just gonna follow on that and say that we can use the data and the outputs of the models to show the crew what good looks like. And the goal is for, we all have these goals of improvement, whether it's environmental, performance, maintenance. But now that we know what good looks like, they can use that to show that they are doing better.
I'd like to thank the participants, the panelists today, and the people who came in to view as well. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time. I'd also like to thank my team here at Elaborate and Ship Management International with Karen, Claire, Phil, and Diptesh. They've done a lot of work in putting this all together, and thanks for all of that as well. These are very, very important webinars. We do a series of them, and we do try and get the top sort of blue sky thinkers really in the industry. It's all about objective debate, and I think we've achieved that today. Once again, panelists, thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you for giving your time up, and with all of the time zones, and I really, really do appreciate that. So, round of applause to you, and thank you very much. And it will also be covered editorially in the magazine, so we look forward to catching up after this as well. So, thank you very much indeed.